All right. Okay, so it's been a bit, but I just finished a fairly thorough playthrough of a science fiction role-playing game situational module called Station Xeno. This particular version is built for Death in Space, which is a sci-fi role-playing game based in a very gritty and dark kind of very low-tech with weird void corruption and stuff like that. But the main purpose of this video is to more go over the module than the game system that I used. But I used Death in Space. Highly recommend for people to check out. I believe you can find this on the Free League's website. Wonderful game, but I am here to talk about Station Xeno. Now, I would like to give the play-by-play on like what my character did and everything like that, but because I liked it so much, I don't want to spoil any of the kind of story beats and other things that are revealed through regular gameplay. This is a solo engineered module, meaning that it is intended to play as a solo astronaut, a solo adventure on your space station, on your ship. And the basic gist is that you arrive on Station Xeno, and you quickly figure out that it is infested with these large alien bugs that you have to run away from as you enter into the station. And from there, you're basically lost, and it's basically dark, and you only have your wrist light, HUD light, so you don't even have a full flashlight. And your character is in this station with whatever that you built your character with in Death in Space's standard character creation rules. I had two characters that I went through, one of which died along the way, and then I created another character to basically pick up where my old character left off. The whole premise is that you are exploring a pretty extensive station that has various rooms in it. And while you can, in theory, explore, the rooms standard-like, in terms of if you roll when you first are running and you're not stopping, you're not paying attention, the narrative basically paints a picture of you running away from the hangar that your ship is, which has been damaged or possibly damaged by the aliens that were chasing you. And you're able to flee, and you roll 2d6, one for the 10s and one for the ones. And so you enter in that room and you start in that room. So this would be 45. So I would be starting the game in this room, whatever 45 is, which my little cheat sheet tells me it is the research lab. So I would start my session in that room, explore and do whatever the things that are part of that room, and each room has an entry, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure based off of the Death in Space rule set. It's very wordy. There's a lot of narrative and there's an underlying story on what happened to the station and figuring out how you can acquire ship parts to fix your ship. If you discover another room of the station, there might be a different way that you can help yourself or hinder yourself depending on your success level. There's a third way that you can sort of like kind of close out the game that I've discovered, of which is how I ended the game, which I will cover shortly. But one thing I want to make absolutely clear is that if you don't mind reading and, you know, sort of like sinking your teeth into all the various things that your character runs into, then the choices are fairly limited. You can give yourself advantage or a bonus to your rolls depending on what your starting kit was, but it's very loose. It's not explicitly made clear in the book and in the entries, saying that if you have item X, if it helps you, it only gives clues, and then if you have those clues already, then those help you down the road as well. I'm being vague, but that's the idea there. One really interesting aspect of the station is what they call the disturbance track, and this is the little cheat sheet that you can is in the back of the book, along with the tables. But I found the files for the module tracking sheet and also the various tables and info that you need. The encounters, what you can discover, traps, and also the aliens themselves. There are two types: an adult alien and an alien hatchling. I ran into them a lot, and basically I ran away most of the time. But the disturbance track is pretty interesting, because as you are running around, and for the most part, every time that you enter into a room, as long as it's a new room, you just roll a 2d6, and as long as it's not snake eyes, then you didn't make enough noise to attract an encounter. Think of this as a rising threat level, right? And anytime that you would cross off a box, either because you made too much noise or you used your light, you can, if you ever hit a grayed out box, and there's slightly more on each of the various levels, you have to roll for an encounter. Again, on the cheat sheet, you roll at first 2d4, 3d4, or 4d4, and with that spread, you get a slightly modified list of things that can happen, and mostly it's traps and lots of aliens. And that being said, anytime that you run into an encounter, you can either flee or you can fight. And to be very honest, there's no real reason to fight unless you want to collect alien parts for some other part of your campaign. But since I was doing this as a solo standalone experience, I wasn't going to do any of that. So basically, anytime I ran into aliens, I ran away. But the area tracking thing here is really interesting, because there are 36 rooms effectively, and each time that you roll, you're going to roll a room code, 1, 3, 1, 4, so on. But anytime that you go into a new room that you've already been to, you mark the disturbances a track. So the longer that you're in the station, the less likely that you're going to find new rooms. So therefore, you're going to be wandering around areas that you've already been to, making more of a disturbance and attracting more attention to yourself, and then therefore possibly fighting more enemies. The clues list here, there's A through J. Most of them is a lot of lore and a lot of information to help you kind of figure out how to deal with the aliens or how to deal with the station itself. I would have liked it a little more clear on certain aspects of the clues, because it only really tells you about the clues in the beginning. There are a few areas and terminal entries in the station that may tell you to mark a clue on the log sheet. These may come into play later, or they just might be something interesting that you stumbled upon that will never come up again. Either way, mark it off. If you have already marked it, disregard it and move on. If you marked all of the clues indicated for certain areas, read those instead of moving to your next area. So effectively, if you have certain clues for a particular area, it'll list it in bold on the entry, and it will tell you to read those. There is one particular set of clues that I wish that my first character had discovered that I already had. I had already uncovered most of the clues needed, and I would have had a bonus to something. But since it wasn't made clear that I had them all, or rather there was no check in the book to say, hey, if you have, clues A, B, and C, then read entry whatever. That wasn't made explicitly clear, and so that's one kind of nitpick I have with this module, is that it wasn't made explicitly clear as to read that section once I got the various completed clues. One thing that is also interesting is that there are various notes scattered around that kind of tell you how best to approach a particular problem. Now, there's no innate sort of bonus in the book that says, oh, because you read this, you get a bonus or anything like that. That would leave up to interpretation and probably just the core rules of Death in Space. Whereas if it says that your background might come into play, you might get advantage or a bonus to your roll. That's kind of up to you as the player and the GM, because this is a solo module for a game that it's intended for a group play. That being said, you can play this with multiple players, and you could run this as the GM, and then just use these modules. And it's actually kind of well suited for exactly that. There's not a lot of prep that you need to do. This is a really cool book for any sort of sci-fi, horror-esque system. You could use this for Mothership. You can use this for obviously Death in Space, which this book is made for. But you can even do it for Traveler. You can do it for anything, and for Ironsworn Starforged even, which is something I might try in the future. But what I will say is that for the surprise replayability of this, it's pretty low. So once you've gone through this book, you kind of know what to expect. And I guess what you could do is just maybe not play it for a while and then pick it up to see if you remember any of it. But on the note of group play or multiple characters, if it's a group of play, obviously keeping track of where everyone is, that's up to the table. But as a soloist, I went through 2 characters. Now, you might wonder what happens. Well, just like anything else, my first character died in room 11, the bunk room, and his body just dropped dead. He's just there. with all his stuff and all his paper notes, that he read and all that fun stuff. And then I just quickly ran up a new character from the Death in Space rules, and then randomly generated where his story was going to start. And 20, the skull on this one is a 1, so he would have entered and started his story in the security center. As it stands, he did start his story in the generator room again, and then I went and I just continued playing the game with his character. That being said, with a new character, it does not mean that this stuff goes away. Remember that this character in the narrative probably was being super quiet or was still hiding away from the aliens up until the point that you picked up with it. The reasons why you have a second character or a third or a fourth, depending on how many characters you go through, you can leave that up to the narrative that your ship had multiple characters, and when they landed, they all scattered to the winds in the station. But my first character did a lot of work before they finally expired. They died from a trap, in fact, something I could not have avoided, and I didn't have any void points to activate my vibration damper skin, which was really unfortunate. But yeah, so that's how that happened. So all the rooms that were already discovered were still entered into. So as far as the aliens and the mechanics of the station is concerned, you have already been in those rooms. So the disturbance at track and the area of tracking are all the same. So even if your new character technically had not been in all the other rooms, all the other stuff has been accessible or has been accessed as if it were. Maybe that sentence didn't make much sense, but that is how that is. It made it interesting because I wanted to try to get my new character to arrive in the bunk room, which I needed Snake Eyes, actually, a 1 and a 1. And I never got there, because if I did get there, he would have had access to a few cool weapons, some parts that he needed to fix the generator of the station, some of the physical clues that my first character chose to take with them. But other than that, he survived just long enough to discover the clues needed to find the to operate the escape pods, and then he found the escape pods. So my second character survived, but went out of the station pretty quickly with not much loot to show for it, and obviously did not retrieve the main station or the main ship. So he kind of left his co-worker or his station, his shipmate in the station, because he didn't even see my first character die. So, and I'm not going to spoil the ending of what happens at the end of that. But know that this system is pretty brutal. It is very lethal, and in general, Death in Space, if you get into combat, bad things will happen, period. Your characters are not beefy, and I even gave my characters max HP just because I'm solo and just because I'm by myself, and it was still very, very hard. I mean, a lot of damage, if it goes through, is a 1d6 or a d8, which is like, you could get one shot in this game. But the station was fun to play. It kind of had me for a few sessions over the last few days, and I gotta say it now that I've played it, I think I might read all these little entries. The station crew, which I find interesting that there are various stats for them, because you learn pretty quickly that there's not a lot of living people in the book. And I've been to most of the locations, and most that I've seen, scientists were dead. The, you know, various people in charge were, you know, were killed or had starved or whatever it was. So having stats for all these people tells me that there might be a different way to interact with this game and a different way to play it, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so my general overall like thoughts is I highly recommend it. I got this. Oh, I forget how. I forget if this was a. I forget if this was a drive-through purchase or else. It seems like it is. It feels like it is. But anyway, Station Xeno by Squid Ink, compatible with Death in Space. It was a lot of fun. My first character got a lot done. Found an interesting kind of wanted to try to fix things, but ran into some really heavy trouble. Had to run away from like 20 aliens, and that's what eventually killed them. They stumbled into a room that they were already in, and I activated a new trap that they didn't see before, and they just could not dodge out of the way, and they just died. Then my second character, like I mentioned, didn't really do much, just wandered around running away from aliens until they found a few clues, and then stumbled into the escape pod and then escaped. You know, so procedurally, you know, it's a very easy system to like go through with your character. One little footnote is I recommend anyone who's going to play this solo is to make sure that you read your character's like origin benefits, and if you have any cosmic mutations, they might help you more often than you think. And your personal belongings as well. Like you can, there was a moment where I had a riot shield, for like a couple of rooms before I needed to drop it because it was just too. It took up way too many slots, because I had to pick up something else. But the riot shield, even though it gave me protection from all, you know, projectiles, I also wanted to use it as like a blockade for a particular thing to block off a room to make it safe where it otherwise would not be safe. But I didn't do that because it wasn't necessarily in this book, but in hindsight, allow yourself to stretch, you know, the rules of the various items and things that you have, because, you know, you might walk into the station with 2 frag grenades, no armor, and, you know, a personal trinket, you know, from like a dead relative, and that's all you got. And once those frag grenades are up, you got nothing to defend yourself, but you might pick up things that might be useful in different ways. My first character happened to be a Chrome, so they had the origin benefit of converse with computers. Now, I took that as it gave me advantage whenever I had to deal with a locked terminal, which by this, it was just you roll a tech and see if you succeed. And so I just gave my character advantage. So definitely look over your character sheets, and pick and choose the things that you want to be consistent on. And that's the thing I chose with my character, is the converse with computers was going to give them advantage on tech rolls for dealing with computers. So yeah, Station Xeno was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. Both my characters, one of my characters died for sure. The other one probably died. So, but those were my thoughts on the Death in Space module Station Xeno. And I think that's all for now. And until next time, folks, I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.